Everyone, while the Canadian Finance Committee is trying to use Justin Trudeau's salary as a stick to get him to come into work, they say he's been off 20 days in the last 6 weeks, meaning 50% of the calendar. I talked about this the other day. So they're trying to withhold his salary. I think that is an interesting juxtaposition to Donald Trump, who donates all of his salary, and he just donated $100,000 to National Park Service to repair and restore their national monuments. So isn't that interesting? I mean, both are rich men, and Justin Trudeau is not in charge of what's happening with the Finance Committee, right? But it's interesting, the tale of two paychecks, right? Like what's happening with the Canadian Prime Minister's pay and what's happening with the President of the United States pay. And man, interesting that the media tries to make one of them look terrible and one of them look great. And it's opposite to what you would expect given what's done with the two paychecks in the first two stories there. Talking about the United States, Bill Blair says, "We are extending the reciprocal restrictions at the Canada-US border for another 30 days till September 21st, 2020. We will continue to do what's necessary to keep our communities safe." I don't like this restriction. I think that restricting our travel is counterintuitive, and freedom is messy and unsafe. And I mean, not saying that if you're sick, you should be able to come across the border necessarily. But we're still landing flights from China. We're still landing flights from infected areas. We've got 5 new cases in PEI. PEI had 0 cases at all. Now 5 new cases because of migrant workers. And yet, because of the Atlantic bubble, I can't travel to visit family if I want to, right? Which is wild. So migrant workers can come in and bring the COVID-19, but Canadians can't go. Because, I don't know, because they're trying to protect Canadians from COVID-19, from spreading it within the country. I mean, the reason that these rules are hard to live by is because they're so inconsistent. They don't apply all the time to all the people. It's, well, this case, in this case, in this case, in this case. It doesn't work for me. I don't like it at all. And so there are families who live just across the border from each other who haven't been able to see each other since this whole thing started. And they're not going into hotspot areas. They're not going into major cities, right? The New York State is huge, right? It's massive, right? Buffalo is very different than New York City. And so it's very interesting, these using a very, very draconian full lockdown as opposed to targeted, like, well, if you go to New York City, then you have to abide by these laws or whatever. It's very, I don't know. And they say that they can contact trace. You hear stories about people hearing about it if they leave their house, if they should be in their house, and yet we can't use any of those tools. We have to keep the border closed. It just doesn't jive. Like, either we can do these things, and then if we can do these things, if masks work, if 6 feet apart works, then what's all this stuff about, right? It's insane. It's insane. It doesn't make any sense. It's not logically, it's not cohesive. It doesn't follow reasoning. It just does whatever it wants. Oh, you're at a Black Lives Matter protest? No problem. Go out and, celebrate with your friends and, hang out in the street and dance and all sorts of other stuff. You're at a dentist? No, you can't use the washroom here. What? It's wild. Aerosolization. Yeah, okay. This was surprising news yesterday, reported by Global. Fatal car explosion outside Kitchener Courthouse caused by suspected IED. Import the third world, become the third world? What is happening? IEDs are something that you used to read about that happened in Iraq, in places that were occupied by U.S. forces and people were Taliban or guerrilla warfare was breaking out. IEDs in Kitchener, and this story is like developing. So this was happening yesterday, August 14th. Today's August 15th, 9:22 p.m. I guess it was last updated. I only read it yesterday afternoon, so I don't know all the details yet. But hold on, I'm going to see if there's anything important. No, really, the most important aspect is the headline. Like, the rest is kind of details. So and not really important details. They don't have a lot of leads, etc. So very, very, very interesting. And the violence that has increased a lot since 2015 is being ignored by liberals because of racism? Really? Like, this is seriously going to be the thing that is going to overshadow IEDs in Kitchener? Racism? It's unbelievable. Okay. Global news. New Brunswick poised to head to the polls as Liberals pull out of stability talks. Now, if you remember the New Brunswick election, it was a razor thin decision, right? I think it's by 2 seats or something like that. So this is going to be very interesting. Like, they've got a minority, they've got a low amount of seats. It's a very interesting situation here. So August 14th, New Brunswick is poised to head to the polls after Liberal leader Kevin Vickers pulls out of all-party stability talks on Friday. Premier Blaine Higgs had pitched the power-sharing agreement as a deal that would ensure the Tory government survives until the next fixed election date in October 2022 or until the coronavirus pandemic runs its course. The Liberal caucus has rejected the Premier's proposal to keep his government in power for the next 2 years, Vickers said at a press conference on Thursday. The Liberal leader said it was unacceptable to give the Higgs minority government power comparable to majority government without an official opposition. And I scroll down a little bit. Higgs said he's disappointed a deal couldn't be done, but did not say if he will try and reach a deal with the Greens and People's Alliance Party. He also said that he's not planning on calling an election in the next 48 hours and will take the weekend to decide whether to call an election. Higgs said he needs time to consider his next move, but did nothing to dampen election speculation. We are prepared, he said, when asked if his party was ready for election. So it's not necessarily going to the polls tomorrow. The composition of their government, as it said here, the People's Alliance Party, I think they hold the balance of power. Basically, like, they went with the PC or the Conservatives, and that was able to give them the ability to form government. And if they still support the PC, they can continue with this governing structure until the government falls, as far as I understand it. And I could be misunderstanding something. There could be another piece that I've not seen, but yeah, it's here. It is. The Tories hold 20 seats in the provincial legislature, where there are 20 Liberals, 3 People's Alliance members, 3 Greens, and 1 Independent, and 2 vacancies. Yeah, so it's razor thin. I mean, like, the control of the government is very, very razor thin, basically depending on the 3 People's Alliance members and the 3 Greens, I guess, if the 3 Greens are willing to support the Liberals. Anyway, it's very, very. I said this too much today, but whatever. Weird. It's interesting. It's interesting because something's going to happen, right? So it's unfortunate that it's not our federal government, but something's going to happen. Okay, a furious Premier Doug Ford is railing against Ontario Lottery and Gaming for awarding exclusive fat cats big bonuses, executive fat cats big bonuses in the middle of a pandemic that closed casinos. This one's interesting here. So Jasmine Moulton says, why are execs at Ontario Lottery, owned by Ontario taxpayers, still up for bonuses when revenues are off by $200 million and thousands have been laid off? Finance Minister owes taxpayers some answers. So Ford says, I can't do anything about this, while also simultaneously giving them $500 million, I think it is, a $500 million loan. You could do something about that, Premier. I'll tell you what I think you could do in about 10 seconds as soon as I get through this. Okay, Ford slams OLG for paying executive bonuses amid $200 million revenue loss and layoffs. Executives at the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation, OLG, will be eligible for bonuses this year, despite expectations of more than $200 million in revenue and layoffs of thousands of casino workers amid the COVID-19 shutdown. Ontario's gaming and casino sector has suffered immense financial losses since the start of the pandemic. In a first quarter financial report released Wednesday, the provincial government revealed the expected revenue from the OLG has declined to $600 million from an expected $809 million. An angry Premier Doug Ford lashed out at OLG's leadership for the move on Friday, bluntly calling it not good. Ford said because the organization is arm's length from the government, he can't block the payments, and that its management warned him not paying the bonuses would likely trigger a wave of lawsuits. Despite that, Ford urged OLG to put the payments on hold and said his finance minister will be looking into the organization. You got to think these things out, guys, he said, addressing OLG's leadership during a news conference. Ford went further, saying of OLG heads, they aren't too friggin' smart. Doug Ford going for hearts and minds. Okay. It sends a horrible message, frankly. It's completely irresponsible, Jared Diaz, president of Unifor, said of the bonuses. I think it's funny they're trotting Diaz out to be on Doug Ford's side. The province also announced in May a $500 million loan to OLG to temporarily support the corporation, but that doesn't mean the bonuses are off the table. OLG did not provide specific dollar figures around the bonuses, saying only that they are currently under review. So, yeah, if I just provided $500 million to a company and they said, you know what we're going to do with half of it? We're going to give bonuses out to our executives. I'd say, remember that $500,000 loan I sent you? Make it 250 or $500 million loan, make it 250 million. And you want to give bonuses? Explain that to your employees. Have fun. It's just dumb. I mean, like at first I thought, well, you know, if they're managing it as a corporation by themselves, blah, 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 maybe they can do whatever they want. But if you're taking $500 million from the government as a loan to help your corporation survive, you say, and then you say, oh, thanks for that $500 million. $200 million of that is going to bonuses. Okay, no. Okay, here is moving on. Into the corruption. This was like the main story for the day, or one of the main stories for the day. Oh, I'm not too long. Okay, we're not doing too bad. Chagger testifies no one from her office was involved in the call with Craig Kielburger on April 17th about the unsolicited wheat proposal for youth entrepreneurship. The charity's report says her chief of staff and others were there. I'm not going to go into this. It's just funny how often the Liberals are caught in their lies, right? Like they're lying under oath in parliamentary committees, trying to get to the bottom of the WE scandal, and they just lie, and they lie, and they lie, and then they get caught, and they lie more. And here is Dan McTeague. He said, holy smokes, the stench of corruption is now overcoming, I think maybe overwhelming. Trudeau government gave $20 million to a company that paid the Liberal minister. And this is an exclusive to the Post-Millennial, but it's Gallibo. And man, like, they have no shame. This Liberal government does not understand shame. They just do it. They don't care. Trudeau government gave $20 million to a company that paid Liberal minister. So this is in addition. There's two companies that got hundreds of thousands of dollars, $600,000 each for ventilators that are not approved in any jurisdiction. And this company, those are different Liberal friends, right? This company with ties to this Liberal minister. Man, like there's so many of these scandals now. What is it going to take? What's it going to take to get the NDP off the bench? There's a little bit of movement. They want an investigation. We've got to investigate this. The Trudeau government gave $200 million to venture capital investment company that the Liberal Heritage Minister Stephen Gallibo advised. Gallibo has advised Cycle Capital Management, the organization that received this federal funding, since 2018. According to his LinkedIn, the Liberal minister continues to work for the organization as a strategic counselor. As well as this, the Office of the Ethics Commissioner states that Gallibo had received income from a contract with Cycle Capital Management within the last 12 months. Cycle Capital Management made the $20 million government funding announcement this February. Despite this, a spokesperson for Minister Gallibo told the Post-Millennial that he no longer works or receives payment from Cycle Capital Management. The spokesperson did not say whether the minister recused himself from a cabinet discussion about giving Cycle Capital Management the $20 million. It's unclear whether there was a cabinet discussion regarding the Venture Capital Catalyst Initiative and whether Minister Gallibo recused himself. Gallibo joined Cycle Capital Management in 2018, becoming a Liberal member of Parliament for Montreal riding of Laurier-Saint Marie a year later. The Conservatives' ethics critic, Michael Barrett, said Justin Trudeau needs to be transparent with Canadians that Minister Gallibo was not part of the decision-making process to award $20 million to a firm he previously worked at, he added. Yeah, was he or wasn't he? And do I think that we're going to find out the answers to all of this? I think probably we're going to be plunged into an election that's just as... Well, I described the debates when Bernier went into the 2019 election debate. I described those as a washing machine. It felt like a washing machine. The whole election kind of felt like a washing machine. Like, who knows what's true, right? Like, everything was just like, churn, 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 churn. If there was a bad story about the Liberals, there was 4 bad stories about the Conservatives or the People's Party or the Greens. Not so much. The Greens and the NDP were kind of left alone. So basically, if you were Green, NDP, or Liberal, there were nothing but softball articles for you. And if you were Conservative or anything else, then you were the reason that the reasonable ideas by the Greens, the NDP, and the Liberals weren't being talked about right, or you were the wrong lens, right? It's if they could just get rid of you, they could get rid of you. So yeah, that's what I mean by washing machine. Like anybody who doesn't have a lot of time to understand that what the news is trying to do is trying to confuse you rather than give you information, they're gonna think whatever crazy party line the news is pulling that week, really. And it's so. confusing is the wrong word. It's purposely confusing. There's a better word to describe it, but I don't have it. Anyway, here's NDP talking about wanting to have a full investigation. Global News is reporting, and this is yesterday, August 14th. NDP want full investigation into whether We Charity engaged in improper lobbying. I think everybody heard that they weren't registered, and when they were registered, well, we're going to get to that in a minute. So, like, they did. Here it is. We Charity did more lobbying on Parliament Hill than General Motors records show. We Charity lists 18 employees as federal lobbyists. Had 38 meetings with cabinet, MPs, and staff since March 11th, including 8 meetings with Bill Morneau's office. Bill Morneau's like a heavy hitter, right? Like you've got to have connections to lobby the finance minister for a program, right? To talk to him, you've got to have a good program. You've got to be up there, man. The finance minister's no joke, right? Like, okay, anyway, here it is. What are the New Democrats waiting for proof that we need an investigation? They set this out yesterday. This is crazy. Okay. The New Democrats are joining the Conservative Party in asking the federal lobbying watchdog to investigate whether the embattled We Charity organization engaged in improper lobbying ahead of their Liberal government's decision to award the charity a sole source contract to administer a student volunteer grant program, excuse me. On Thursday, the charity's executive director defended why we hadn't registered previously, saying that in past years, we engagement with the government was about 1 to 3% of our overall budget and engagement. We thought it was minimal. If I thought that registration was required, we would have done it. Dalal al-Wahidi told the House of Commons Finance Committee, which is probing the government's decision to have we administer the Canadian Student Service Grant. CSSG. So yeah, they were lobbying more than the federal. They were lobbying the federal government more than General Motors, but they thought what they were doing was minimal, 1 to 3%. I mean, regardless of what you think is minimal, if you read the Lobbying Act, and we did the other day, you know that any communication with the minister with the minister about the things that these people were talking about requires submitted reports, requires reporting, right? And like this was a big chunk of their business, other than real estate. So it's interesting that they just now registered. You know, we should investigate that, says the NDP. Still, I don't think that we're quite at the government is ready to fall part yet. I don't think so. The NDP are broke. They don't want an election. The Greens don't want an election. The Bloc don't care. I think that Blanchette would vote in favor to dissolve the government at this point. I think he would, and the Conservatives would, but they're leaderless and they don't have a direction either. So until they've got a leadership in place, will it be Peter MacKay or Erin O'Toole? You think Leslyn Lewis? I don't think so. I think it'll be Peter MacKay, and if it's not Peter MacKay, I think it'll be Peter O'Toole, and they're the same pretty much in my opinion. One is Kanzuk. They all support open borders, all of that other stuff. I don't think the parties want an election. I think they want to leave it as is because they don't have the bank, they don't have the purse. Nobody's been donating to political parties. They don't have the money. It's, I don't know. It is what it is. I don't think that they're going to vote to dissolve the government, regardless of how badly this Liberal government needs to fall. This Trudeau government needs to fall. But I don't think they're incentivized to drop it because they can't fight an election. And the Liberals, believe it or not, can. They've got lots of money. Anyway, moving into COVID-19, peaks and valleys expected until 2022. Hold on, let me reframe. The Conservatives have lots of money, but they don't have a direction that is resonating with voters, and I think they know it. The NDP don't have money, the Bloc don't care, and the Greens don't. I don't think they have money. I think they'd lose probably both seats. Elizabeth May is crazy, and her stances have been shown to be more fringe than originally believed. I think that's what I mean by she's crazy, especially after the drunken Omar Khadr thing, plus getting involved in the Green leadership race now, kind of all of the stuff that's coming out around that. There's a lot of people are not very happy with Elizabeth May. Do I think it's enough to make her lose her seat? I don't know. I don't think so. She might just step down and retire. Who knows? But I don't think she wants an election either. So when it's all said and done, I think that everybody's going to kind of grin and bear it. And if we are plunged into a fall election, I think we get almost the same parliament. I think we almost get it back. There's an outside chance that the Conservatives take Ontario. If the Conservatives take Ontario, they get the chance to have the Prime Minister in charge of a minority government. If it's Peter MacKay or Erin O'Toole, Is that likely? I don't know. I don't know. There's a lot of hate for the Liberals right now in Ontario, but I don't know that it's enough. I don't know. Okay. COVID-19. COVID-19 peaks and valleys expected until 2022. I don't know how anybody can believe Miss Tam. The idea that, like, the curve, and here's the curve, Mr. Randy Hiller. Randy Hiller is a now independent MPP, former MPP in Doug Ford's government, but was removed, I guess, for disagreeing with Mr. Ford. So this is the flu curve and COVID curves. And, well, he says, how coincidental, that sure looks a lot like the same curve pattern in comparison in Canada. Maybe just a fluke that COVID patterns look a lot like flu patterns everywhere. And this is Germany COVID 2020 versus influenza surveillance 2018, picture in picture. So there you go. Very interesting, right? Like, what's causing that? And why are our public health people telling us whatever it comes to mind on whatever day of the week it is, right? Like, it just doesn't seem consistent. It doesn't seem logical. It doesn't seem like you can follow the reasoning. You know, Black Lives Matter protest versus going to the dentist. Black Lives Matter protest versus going out for a walk, right? Have you seen what's coming out of Australia? Why are all the schools across the entire world the same kind of lockdown, or at least the Western world? I've seen lots of different reports from different parts of the world talking about the same kind of lockdowns, the same kind of mandatory masks. Nova Scotia just mandated masks. We'll talk about that in just a minute. Andrew Lawton has a long interview with Andrew Scheer. Andrew Scheer is the now former, I guess, on the 21st former leader of the Conservative Party. So this is an exit interview if you're interested in that. I have not watched it. I don't know if it's any good, but I thought people might be interested in it. So Nova Scotia is going to be implementing mandatory masks. And I'm not saying that every single country around the world is doing exactly the same thing. But I am saying that it is very interesting that regardless of the number of cases in Guelph, regardless of the number of cases in Nova Scotia, regardless of the number of cases in Northern Ontario or Southern Ontario or whatever, Ontario's education school plan mandates masks. So if you're going into school and the teachers are all telling you that masks keep you healthy, despite not having any real data to back that up, other than the data that correlation between the cases declining and people wearing masks, so masks must help, right? There's that correlation, but correlation doesn't prove anything. And in most tests, most controlled tests, the cloth masks did very little and no masks really helped with preventing spread of respiratory viruses. And please do find me a study that says they help, because I have not found one study that says a mask helps with cutting down respiratory virus spread. But now Nova Scotia's original plan didn't have masks. And now they're saying this year will be different. Nova Scotia to implement mandatory masks for grade 4 to grade 12 students. And it's not very good. It's not a good idea, because peer pressure is a thing. If you have somebody who really truly believes that this is dangerous and that masks help, and that you not wearing a mask, you're putting them at risk. And not even if they're your friend, but if you have to deal with them in a way that, like, they have to help you do something, be in your class, you have to see them every day or whatever, right? It's not like it's somebody at the grocery store and you can say, all right, crazy, see you later. The interpersonal comes into play, and you are then forced by peer pressure to comply with something that is not helpful for you. And the only way to deal with that is to remove yourself from that situation, but that means removing yourself from the wider society. This is not a healthy thing. And I don't know if this is real. I saw Nuremberg trials talking about how mandatory masks was a war crime. I haven't looked into that. I don't know the ins and outs of the Nuremberg trial. My older brother was into it when I was young, but I was just too young to understand it. And then by the time I was old enough to understand it, the internet was a thing. So I never got back to it. And never got back to it to really dig deep into it. So, I think that it's faulty. I think that it is false. I think that if you're sick, you should stay home. If you want to wear a mask when you go out, wear a mask. But you shouldn't have other people have to act out your fears, right? Like, because you're afraid I should wear a mask. Sorry, man. It's not how this should work. So it's very insidious. I don't like it. I think it's bad policy, bad leadership, bad everything. Awful. And this government, the Ford government, is losing support left and right because of this trash. But there's who else? Who else is going to be? What other party is going to? The Liberals? Yeah, right. Yeah, sure. We'll vote them into power any day now. Sure. So, I don't know what the options are. I don't know what the other choices could potentially even be. But the government is getting worse and worse at representing the people, and better at saying we're doing it for your own safety, while simultaneously not actually able to back that up. And that's frustrating. Okay, all students and staff members will receive 2 free reusable cloth masks at the start of the year. Oh, wonderful. After that, disposable masks will be available upon request. Churchill and Strang said the decision to update the plan is a result of change in guidance from the Public Health Agency of Canada. There will be a valid reason that individuals can't wear masks, Strang said. Churchill said that enforcement of the masks rule will be shared between administrators and school staff. However, they will not be required to ask for proof of why individuals are not wearing masks. Just wait for it. It's coming. Very soon they will require proof. At first, airlines didn't require proof, and now they do. And they're citing people are uncomfortable. Deal with it. Sorry, I don't care. And not that I don't care because you're uncomfortable, but the idea that it works is faulty. It doesn't work. If it did work to prevent spread of a respiratory virus, then maybe the cost benefit would have a different conversation. But the cost to you is high and the benefit to everyone else is low. So it doesn't make any sense. Last story from the day. Dan Alvis is saying, as a tool for lowering greenhouse gas emissions, BC's carbon tax is a dud, according to a new study by the Canadian Energy Research Institute. So this is published August 14th. I've been seeing a lot more climate change stories. I ignore them because it's just fear porn. It's just ridiculous fear porn, and I'm not interested in it. But stuff like this is interesting because it flies in the face of the narrative, and it's interesting that it's getting published. Carbon tax isn't working. It says, as a tool for lowering greenhouse gas emissions, BC's carbon tax is a dud, according to a new study by the Canadian Energy Research Institute. The study compared BC's carbon tax and Alberta's tax on large emitters to the European Emissions Trading Scheme and Quebec's cap-and-trade agreement with California. The study concludes that the BC carbon tax was beneficial for the economy, but had little impact on emissions compared to cap-and-trade in Quebec and Europe. BC carbon tax policy boosted economic activity but had no effect on emissions, the report concludes. Since the objective of the regulatory policy is to reduce emissions, our results suggest that the carbon tax policy in British Columbia failed to achieve its goal. In fact, oil prices have been found to be a bigger effect on emissions in BC than carbon tax. The study likewise found Alberta's policy, which taxes large emitters, didn't result in emissions reductions. So none of the initiatives that we're doing results in emission reductions. It just costs people money. Okay, and it's great for the economy, they say. It increases economic activity all sorts of places. Yeah, because you're paying into the carbon tax, and the carbon tax is generating a fund, and that fund spends money, right? Like that's why it's generating increased economic activity. But you know what they do about stuff like this? When they say the study concludes that the tax was beneficial to the policy boosted economic activity but had no effect on emissions, since the objective of the regulatory policy is to reduce emissions, it failed. So what they do is they rewrite the policy to say reduce emissions and increase the economic activity, and then you get a success, right? Boom, no problems. It was successful, and then all the Karens and all the people who want to hold up reports say, oh, but it says it was successful at reducing emissions, and then you say, well, no, it was successful at increasing economic activity, but not at reducing emissions. And then they say, oh, well, the study says it was a success, so I don't want to listen to you, fake news. And, that's what I mean by you can't have a logical conversation with somebody, because they've been loaded with all of these pattern responses that they're programmed to say. It's incredible. It's incredible. Like previously intelligent people just wasted. Okay, back to this. Chris Batile, a Simon Fraser University expert in energy and climate policy, associated researcher for the Institute for Sustainable Development and International Relations, said the BC carbon tax would be more effective in reducing emissions if they were higher and applied more broadly. Oh, it would be great if we made everybody poor and unable to afford their car or gas or anything. Currently, the tax in BC is $40 per ton. It was supposed to have gone to $45 in April, but the increase was deferred due to the impacts of COVID-19. We're not suggesting that BC should scrap the carbon tax, says Diana Millington, CERI's vice president. It would be more effective in curbing emissions if it were higher, she said, $40 to $80 per ton by 2020 and $50 to $100 per ton by 2030, and did not provide some examples of the metallurgical coal, natural gas, and LNG sectors in BC. And it's noting that those sectors don't pay carbon tax and that they shouldn't be exempt. They should pay carbon tax. The whole thing didn't work in the first place. We're now paying $40 a ton, or BC is paying $40 a ton for this carbon tax. It doesn't reduce emissions, but the experts don't conclude we should stop doing that, stop costing these people money. Instead, we should double the tax. That will help with the emissions reduction. Double the tax, make it so expensive that people can't afford to drive. These are anti-human policies. They're anti-people policies. More people mean more carbon, okay? And I don't mean to go off on the whole climate change thing, but my goodness, nothing has been more clear as something so clear as the mask debate to show, like, I can't prove global warming. I can't prove anything about it. But the mask thing has been proven, not by me, by many more intelligent people than me. Policy level science, policy driving science has proven that masks don't reduce the spread of respiratory viruses. And yet in the last year, they've been able to flip the science by having some articles written and by just an unending propaganda diet for the regular people. If you get enough people to believe it, it becomes true. And it becomes true for the reasons that I was talking about the mandatory masks in school being insidious, because you don't want to hurt your friend. You don't want to hurt the person who's helping you. You don't want to hurt the person who you have to deal with on a one-to-one level. And they're just following the rules of the bureaucracy that are set out by their governing bodies, right? They can't do anything about it. They're a cog in the wheel. And so you become crushed in the cog, right? Because you have to participate in the society, and there's no other choice, right? You can't just be like, well, I'm gonna create my own shadow society that doesn't behave in a crazy way. They're in charge. They've got the government, right? Like that's just it. I don't know how to fix it, right? They can print whatever they want. They can make any stat out of any pool, any questionnaire. They can have the news back up their faulty science, and we're supposed to just take it with a smile and believe that they're telling us the truth. And yet our leaders do things like, well, not like this, but like the we stuff and the $20 million to their buddies. And how are we supposed to believe these people, right? Like, how can you say these people are acting in good faith when you see the behavior of our leaders, the behavior of the power-grabbing premiers, the power-grabbing municipalities? Like, it's just inappropriate. How can you believe these liars? How can you believe these liars? That's it. That's what it boils down to, and I just don't. Thanks for watching. And by these liars, I mean this one too, right? How can you believe any of them? Not a chance. Not a chance. Thanks for watching, everybody. Check out CanadaPoly.com. Check out CanadaReport.co, and have a wonderful, wonderful day.